All right, let's go over this argument essay exercise. So the point of this exercise was to have you look at different examples of argument essay responses and be able to tell the difference between a good response and a not so good response using the argument essay rubric. So this is an actual example from the 2020 exam. Over time, presidential powers have greatly expanded in the area of foreign policy. Take a position on whether the expansion of presidential powers facilitates or hinders effective foreign policy. So that's where that argument is going to come in. Use at least one piece of evidence from one of the following foundational documents: the Articles of Confederation, Federalist 10, Federalist 70. In your response, you should do the following. Respond to the prompt with a defensible claim or thesis that establishes a line of reasoning. Support your claim with at least two pieces of specific and relevant evidence. One piece of evidence must come from one of the foundational documents listed above, so one of those three here. A second piece of evidence can come from any other foundational document not used as your first piece of evidence, or it may come from your knowledge of course concepts, and then use reasoning to explain why each piece of evidence supports your claim or thesis. Now you'll notice that the concession and rebuttal portion of the argument essay is not listed here, and that's because on the 2020 exam, that was taken out because of changes with coronavirus. Okay, so that's why you don't see that here. So let's look at the three different examples I gave you. These are actual responses from students last year. Let's look at these and decide which ones are good and which ones are not so good. All right, so this one, not such a great response, okay? First of all, there is no thesis. If you've read through this, you'll see that there is not any type of thesis statement that establishes a line of reasoning. So this response might get 1 point, and that would be because it mentions Federalist 10, okay? And that is a piece of evidence. So a scorer might give 1 point because that is listed. However, there is no reasoning that explains how Federalist 10 relates to any thesis because there is no thesis, okay? So this is an example of a not so good response. No thesis, maybe one piece of evidence, okay? So not a great response here. The second example does have a thesis statement, all right? And you can see it here. This expansion of presidential powers facilitates effective foreign policy because, that because is in there. It allows for a strong leader to represent the country and makes it easier to negotiate with other countries, okay? So a thesis statement that lays out the argument. The next part, all right, the piece of evidence. So this person uses Federalist 70, argues why Federalist 70 relates to the thesis. And you can see that here. This expansion facilitates effective foreign policy because it ensures that the American public is aware of the president's action and supports them. Okay, so relating that piece of evidence, using that reasoning to support the thesis. Now, the second piece of evidence comes from Federalist 10. Okay, so again, using that second piece of evidence, relating that piece of evidence back to the thesis with reasoning. This person actually received a 5 on the exam. So this is a good example of how to answer an argument essay. The last example, expansion of presidential powers facilitates effective domestic policy because it allows the president to be able to put things into action to help the country sooner. All right, that is a thesis statement. There is a because in there. Is it a great thesis statement? No, but it is a thesis statement that establishes a line of reasoning. All right, so it goes on to give one piece of evidence, all right, in the Articles of Confederation. They didn't have a central government and did not want to have much power to the president. Because of this, the government did not function and laws between the states were whacked. There was no central power to be able to control it at all, okay? So this is using the Articles of Confederation, and they're using that reasoning to explain why the Articles of Confederation did not work, which again would go back to supporting the thesis. Now, is this a great response? Not necessarily, but it is better than that first example I showed you. So this person would actually receive some points for this response, okay? So not a great response here at all. Decent response would get some points. This is the best response, okay? So I hope that you've looked through these examples and understand a little bit better how to answer these questions and are familiar with the rubric so you know what scorers are looking for.